Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign.
Out that this guy doesn't have the limp he pretended to have, doesn't have like a bent hand that he pretended to have, that he's perfectly fine. He struts off into the sunset, and we learn he was the bad guy all along. And I have to tell you, Mark, that is how I'm feeling today about Tim Walz.
What you get when you mix Tim Walz, a microphone, and two people with zero tolerance for political theater. A verbal demolition so fierce, even his teleprompter wanted out. Greg Gutfeld brings the sarcasm, Megyn Kelly brings the fire, and Tim Walz? Mostly confusion. If you've ever wanted to watch a governor get politically body slammed without anyone even raising their voice, buckle up. This roast is hotter than Walz's approval ratings are cold, and twice as brutal.
Gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DNI.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
Tim Walz, the man, the myth, the political piñata, with the resilience of a wet paper bag in a hurricane. If incompetence had a mascot, it'd wear a North Face jacket, clutch a clipboard, and mumble through a press conference like a confused dad explaining TikTok. Minnesota didn't elect a governor. They accidentally hired a substitute gym teacher with a love for bureaucratic jargon and the raw charisma of cold, unsalted oatmeal.
News for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong in China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me about 15 back and forth with my students. Taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands China.
The excuse for his lies, Michael, is I speak like everybody else.
And just when you thought the bar couldn't possibly sink any lower, Tim Walz drifts in like a fog machine of mediocrity. You know you failed epically when even Greg Gutfeld, the man who turned sarcasm into an Olympic sport, can't tell if you're a real governor or a department store mannequin that somehow stumbled off the sales floor and straight into public office.
Trump's getting sworn in. But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month. Oh, Teb, who do you think he's talking to? Like, what is the audience for that?
I don't even know who the audience is. I was confused when I saw the clip. Who the is he talking to? He's operating on some old program. But the big issue here is he's trying to criticize Trump. That was like supposed to be a jab at Trump being an old white guy or whatever. But it just comes back to the fact that Democrats don't understand economics. Because if you look at the moves that Trump is making right now, these are great economic recovery moves.
Megyn Kelly didn't even have to break a sweat. She glanced at Tim Walz's greatest hits and said, "Oh, this guy? Easy." It was like shooting fish in a barrel, yet the fish were already floating belly up, begging for it.
Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
but
this...
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate.
From 2015 to 2023, which was the date Tim Walz repealed the law requiring life-saving care, 24 babies were born alive in Minnesota after an attempted abortion. Think of how horrific that is.
Let's start with a policy masterpiece known as Tim tries to govern while blinking into the void. His version of leadership feels like a Yelp review for failure. Too slow, too loud, and you regret spending time there. Every time he speaks, your brain starts buffering. If leadership were Wi-Fi, Tim Walz is that one flickering bar you get in the basement, where you have to stand on a chair, holding your phone to the ceiling just to get a signal. But Walz doesn't stop at being generically bad. He's got range. He's like a Renaissance disaster. Education? Botched. Public safety? He breaks out in hives. The economy? He treats it like a piñata, blindfolded, swinging wildly, hoping for candy while sending it straight into a wood chipper. When crime rates soar like Elon Musk's ego, Walz responded with all the urgency of someone ordering a latte with extra foam. It was like, the house is on fire? Great. Let's hold a listening session and brainstorm adjectives. Meanwhile, Minnesotans were dialing 911 and getting hold music composed by a raccoon with a synthesizer.
It's literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the 5. He's a clown without a circus. He
doesn't even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for?
Yeah.
I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months from now.
And then there were the riots. Oh, the majestic disaster of Tim Walz's response to public unrest. It was like watching a Shakespearean tragedy. If Shakespeare had forgotten how to write, dropped acid, and cast sock puppets in every role. While cities burned, Walz delivered press conferences so vague and indecisive that even a magic 8-ball would have said, "Bro, you need to make a decision." Greg Gutfeld watched the chaos unfold and summed it up perfectly. This guy governs like a Stonewall cop who wandered into a war zone and decided the best move was to take a nap in the food court. And honestly, that might have been an upgrade. Tim Walz doesn't manage crises. He vibes with them. He's the guy in the passenger seat as the car barrels off a cliff, calmly suggesting, "Have we tried turning the ignition off and on again?" Meanwhile, the rest of the state is screaming, "Grab the wheel, Tim." But no, he's too busy drafting a strongly worded email to himself.
Doug Brunt, my husband, he doesn't react to that much in the news. And so when it gets his attention, I know that something's gone either very right or very wrong. And he did not like this clip from Tim Walz reacting to the Taylor Swift news. Watch.
Taylor Swift signed childless cat lady. I have to get your response to that, Mr. Governor.
All those things, I am incredibly grateful, first of all, to Taylor Swift. I say that also as a cat owner, a fellow cat owner. Look, Swifties, you heard it. We know that it's there. That was eloquent, and it was clear. And that's the type of courage we need in America to stand up.
And my husband said he looks like Elmer Fudd. That's what he looks like, Elmer Fudd. Like there's something off about this guy.
Megyn Kelly, who can weaponize smugness like a tactical nuke, took one look at Tim Walz's record and morphed into a verbal buzzsaw. She shredded his career like a failed Pinterest project. Glitter from his broken education plan slapped onto crumbling infrastructure, all tossed into the raging dumpster fire he calls public safety. You almost feel bad for the guy until you remember he ran twice. He looked at his own flaming record first term, gave himself a gold star, and said, "Yeah, let's do that again." That's not confidence. That's delusion. Served with a taxpayer-funded cup of Kool-Aid. Under Walz's reign, Minnesota turned into a real-life escape room. Nothing makes sense. The clues contradict each other. And the guy in charge is standing in the corner yelling, "Let's trust the process." What process, Tim? The one where logic goes to die and accountability takes an unpaid sabbatical? Because if that's the plan, congratulations. Mission accomplished in record time.
Gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
Yes, the state budget, an entire sitcom in itself. Tim Walz somehow took a surplus and spent it like a college freshman with a brand new credit card. But instead of pizza and video games, he blew it on endless committees, overpriced consultants, and whatever magical bean factory he thinks grows new government programs. Greg Gutfeld joked that if Walz managed your household finances, you'd be living in a van behind a burned-down Arby's, budgeting for air. The man couldn't prioritize if the choices were cure cancer or buy a golden stapler for a task force on feelings. And then there was his COVID response. Asterisk chef's kiss asterisk with disaster. Imagine locking people in their homes for months, then acting surprised when the economy faceplants like a toddler on roller skates. Walz ran the pandemic like someone who skimmed half a Wikipedia article, panicked, and banned everything except depression and bad Wi-Fi. A masterclass in how not to lead.
Gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
Small businesses were practically begging for mercy, and Walz responded with guidelines thicker than the Bible, complete with fire, brimstone, and a touch of bureaucratic doom. Restaurants got more updates in an iPhone in beta mode. You can open, but only if you stand on one leg, chant the governor's name, and sanitize your eyebrows. But here's the kicker. While everyone else masked up and hunkered down, guess who conveniently forgot his own rules from time to time? Oh, yes, the classic rules for thee, not for me routine. At this point, hypocrisy should be an official cabinet position in the Walz administration. Secretary of Oops, I did it again.
How could they have a Jewish man as her running mate? Bad enough she's married to a Jewish man. This is how I'm sure they're thinking. I mean, Walz, on the other hand, is from a state that just changed his flag to represent that of Somalia. So it's a win. Ms. Harris reportedly calling Governor Walz earlier today to inform him of her, I'm putting her in quotes, first big decision. Who the hell knows who made this choice for her? He's the favorite of Nancy Pelosi. He was the favorite of Bernie Sanders. Does that tell us anything?
Megyn Kelly had an absolute field day with that one. She practically transformed into a human courtroom cross-exam, firing off side eyes sharp enough to Juliana Carrot. So, lockdowns were essential, but you went to Salon? Fascinating. Would you like a shovel to dig that hole deeper, or are you just planning a freestyle? Even the National Guard wasn't spared from Walz's circus of confusion. He activated them late, hesitated, then patted himself on the back like a guy who burned the toast, scraped it off, and called it artisanal. Meanwhile, Gutfeld was across the room delivering what felt like a political stand-up roast. Walz calls it leadership. I call it wishful thinking. Wrapped in cowardice, serve lukewarm.
Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
There's something almost magical about a governor who can alienate both progressives and conservatives in the same week. Tim Walz tried to straddle the political fence so hard, he ended up with splinters in places medical science hasn't even mapped yet. One moment he's promising bold progressive reform. The next he's flinging bureaucratic spaghetti at the wall just to see what sticks. Spoiler alert, nothing did. But now the Walz disaster, too. Let's talk about education, shall we? Under Walz, Minnesota schools turned into a choose-your-own-adventure novel, written entirely in passive voice. Test scores plunged. Teacher shortages ballooned. And what was Walz's big solution? You guessed it, a task force. Because nothing screams decisive leadership like 17 meetings and a PowerPoint slideshow about collective feelings. Megyn Kelly nailed it when she said, watching Walz talk education is like watching a magician pull policy ideas out of a hat, except the hat's on fire and the rabbit is suing for emotional distress. He talks endlessly about equity and access, but when the bell rings, kids still can't read at grade level, and teachers are leaving faster than cats at a dog show.
All right, I have a fourth grader, rising fifth. And if there were ever a tampon dispenser machine in his bathroom, I would personally go and rip it down, like we saw those kids do in Virginia last year. And what will likely be a massive issue for Governor Walz, which is not being covered by the mainstream today, he is being accused of misleading voters on his military service and dodging combat service in Iraq.
And don't even get started on transportation, roads, potholes, public transit. Walz's master plan seems to be ignore it and pray the snowplow ferry handles everything. Meanwhile, Minnesota drivers are dodging craters so massive they qualify for their own zip codes. He tried to greenwash the whole mess too, promising climate-forward investments while watching every electric bus proposal wither and die like a houseplant in his office. You know it's bad when your green policy has less energy than your streetlights. But hey, at least his press conferences are solid. Asterisk of asterisk you enjoy interpretive dithering. Every time Walz steps up to a podium, it's like watching a TED Talk given by someone who forgot the topic halfway through and started describing their lunch. He manages to use 30 words to say absolutely nothing, and by the end, you're left wondering if you accidentally wandered into a meditative audiobook on state-funded confusion.
Sadness. Not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!"
Gutfeld laughed so hard, he nearly needed CPR. Tim Walz makes me nostalgic for dial-up internet, he quipped. At least that made progress eventually. And then there's that one Minnesota slogan Walz clings like a drowning man holding onto a leaky pool noodle. One Minnesota. Sounds nice, until you realize it's just branding duct tape slapped over a state fractured by bad policy, rising crime, and a constant buzz of residents Googling how to move to Wisconsin with their dignity intact. Megyn Kelly couldn't even pretend to take it seriously. She pointed out that the only one Minnesota happening is a unified eye roll every time Walz steps up to a podium. Even his own eyebrows look like they're trying to flee the scene. Tim Walz governs like a man who accidentally wandered into office, got mistaken for someone competent, and thought, well, guess I'll ride this out until someone catches on. His one true talent? Surviving press backlash by smiling awkwardly and passing the buck like it's an Olympic relay baton. And yet, asterisk somehow asterisk, he keeps getting invited back to the table. It's like watching a contestant on a cooking show burn the chicken, drop the sides, and still went around because the judges are too polite to admit it was all inedible. His intentions were seasoned beautifully, they say, as the state spirals into chaos, garnished with apathy.
And I saw a man with a beard, just a guy with a beard, or that expression, believe me, the pepper spray would be all sprayed all over Walz. That is the freak, not J.D. Vance.
Yeah, well, Walz's expression throughout the entire time did not convey steadiness, like almost like unsteady weirdness.
At this point, Tim Walz isn't even a governor. He's a metaphor, a walking, talking embodiment of everything broken in modern politics. Bland, cautious, optics-obsessed, allergic to accountability, and so desperate to please everyone that he ends up accomplishing absolutely nothing. And so here we are, watching Minnesota spiral in a never-ending game of how bad can get, while Walz fiddles on his government-issued violin, churning out policies that sound like they were co-authored by a committee of confused squirrels. Meanwhile, Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly are standing by, popcorn in hand, narrating the fall of House Walz like it's the final season of a badly written political drama. The only thing missing is a laugh track, and even that would be too generous, because under Walz's leadership, Minnesota didn't get direction. It got a cautionary tale with sideburns. And now the rest of us are stuck watching, laughing, and quietly praying that someone, asterisk anyone asterisk, unplugs this malfunctioning bureaucratic robot before he gets any bright ideas about running for president.